Welcome to Finding Holiness, where we delve into timeless Torah wisdom, revealing the sacred in everyday moments. Join us on a journey to elevate your spirituality and discover holiness in every aspect of life. I'm your host, Rabbi David Kadosh, and together, let's embark on a path of spiritual exploration. I hope you enjoy this next episode. All right, everybody. Good evening. Good to see everybody back for another edition of our Parashat HaShavua class. It feels like a long time since we've gotten together and study some parasha. And Baruch Hashem, we have good turnout. Some very, very delicious food in front of me that the viewers cannot see and the listeners neither. But if you were in person, you would be enjoying it as well. We are studying tonight Parashat Vayera, another jam-packed parasha in the book of Bereshit with Avraham Avinu. Kadosh Baruch Hu appears to Abraham after he has a Brit Milah. He's shaken, he's hurt, but he wants to receive guests, and he'll do anything, whatever it takes. Kadosh Baruch Hu sees that and sends him three angels in the image of men that are going to provide him with some news. One news that he's going to have a child, that he's going to be healed, and as well that Sodom is going to be destroyed. Sodom is another big topic of conversation in this week's parasha. Of course, the end of the parasha is arguably the most studied and one of the highlights of the entire Jewish history, so much so that it becomes a focal point in our high holiday services, which is the binding of Yitzhak, the binding of Isaac, Akedat Yitzhak in Hebrew, where Abraham, in his final test, according to most Mefarshim, is commanded to take his child, not his only son, but the son that is going to continue his legacy, or so he was told, and build his nation and sacrifice him on a mizbeach, on an altar. And as he's about to do it, he has stopped and passed the test. Of course, Akedat Yitzhak is referenced every single morning in our daily tefillot. That's how we begin our tefillah, with the story of Akedat Yitzhak, for many, many reasons. One of them is that, as I often mention, is the concept of chesed represented by Abraham Avinu, overpowering that of gvura, which is represented by Yitzhak. So we start our day by mentioning that Abraham took the gvura of Yitzhak and wanted to sacrifice it. So our day should be one that is filled with chesed and rachamim. Tonight I want to speak about a very, very intriguing story that is often overlooked. Tucked away in all of these well-known episodes in the parasha, including the birth of Yitzhak, is the banishment of Yishmael and Akedat Yitzhak. There's a sugya, there's a portion of the story that we just don't pay much attention to. And we're gonna look at this and take an approach from Abraham Avinu. It takes us from Abraham Avinu to David HaMelech and adds a specific period, a context in Tanakh. We are going to begin the class by looking at one of the stories in the book of Shoftim, the book of Judges. Many of you are familiar with a character in our Tanakh whose name was Shimshon, Samson. Shimshon was a shofet, he was a judge. His parents were childless until there was an angel that brought word from God that they were going to have a son. This angel informed the parents that this boy was going to be a Nazir. A Nazir is a person who is commanded to refrain from any grapes or wine. He cannot contaminate with the dead. He cannot become impure. He must leave his hair grow. And he's going to be a Nazir from birth. He's going to be a Nazir from the womb. And he is going to be the savior of the Jewish people from the hands of the Pelishtim. The Navi writes in Sefer Shoftim, Vehu yachel lehoshia et Yisrael miyad Pelishtim. He shall be the first to deliver the Jewish people from the hands of the Pelishtim. Says the Mitzudat David, one of the main commentators on the Navi. He says that Yachel comes from the Lashon lehatchil. that Shimshon is going to start the process of saving the Jews from Ishmael, but David HaMelech is going to come later on in history, and he's going to complete the liberation from the Plishtim. Now, this story of Shimshon is very long, and we're not going to get to the deep and very significant exchanges between the Malach and Shimshon's parents before. But I want to get into the story, and you're going to see why we're relating this story. I want to get into the story where Shimshon is already older, and he goes down to a Philistine city called Timnah. And there, in the city of Timnah, he finds a girl, a daughter of the Plishtim, that catches his eye. And he goes up to his parents and says, Mom, Dad, I really like this girl. She's very pretty. She's got good midot, so on and so forth. And we don't know the name of this girl. It's not Delilah. Delilah comes later on in the story. But he goes to his parents and says, listen, Mom, Dad, I really want to marry this girl. And the parents say, come on, she's a Philistine. Can you not find another girl from the Jewish people? Can you not find someone of our own that you could take instead? Like, what kind of Jewish boy is this, right? We want our sons and daughters to stay within. Of course, it's a horrible thing when they marry out. We know it happens a lot in our world, unfortunately, today, intermarriage. A lot of people, to say whatever, just marry a Jew. That's all I care about, is I want my kids to marry a Jew. But Shimshon is insisting on this girl. Shimshon is insisting on this Philistine girl. And the Navi actually tells us that this story was not as simple as it appeared to the parents. The parents were upset, understandably so, but it wasn't so pashut. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was actually looking to start a fight with the Plishtim, and Shimshon, by attaching himself to this Philistine girl, was going to lay the groundwork to do so. And the pasuk actually says, "Ve'avi ve'imo lo yadeu ki me'Hashem hi." His father and his mother didn't know that all that was going on right now with this girl was all from God. Ki to'ana hu mevakesh mi Plishtim, because he was seeking a pretext against the Plishtim. Uba'et ayi Plishtim moshlim be'Yisrael. And it was at that moment the Plishtim were ruling over the Jewish people. They were ruling over Israel at that time. So Shimshon's parents accompany him down to Timnah. Hey, gotta meet the girl, right? We gotta meet the parents. We gotta meet the girl. Let's see what's going on over here. And but they separated in the Sefer calls. They separated at Karmeh Timnata, the vineyards of Timnah. Why did they separate at the vineyards? Okay, well, very simple. Says the Vilna Gaon. The parents took a direct route through the vineyards. Shimshon did a roundabout route, a circuitous route, because he was a Nazir. And since he was a Nazir, he didn't want to put himself in a situation where he would be tempted to try from the grapes or to taste any wine or anything that was going on over there. So therefore, Mom, Dad, you take the 407, I'm going to go around in the side streets because I don't want to put myself in that situation. As the Gemara says, Maseret Bava Metzia, Lech lech amrin le'nazira. Go, we say to Nazir, Sechor lechar ma lo tikrav. Go around, don't approach the vineyard. Okay, so now, he's on his own now, taking the side streets, and while he's alone on the road, he approaches, or a young lion comes to him roaring. And the Navi says that the Spirit of God gripped Shimshon, and he tore the lion apart, like ripped it to shreds. From here, it's our first encounter where we see that Shimshon has tremendous strength. With his bare hands. He doesn't tell his parents. When he meets his parents again, he doesn't tell, hey, Mom, you don't know what happened. I met a lion. It roared at me. I ripped it. No, just leaves it quiet. Doesn't tell anybody of this incident. Now, meanwhile, the parents are in Timnah, arranged for their son to marry this girl, Timnah. Shimshon met the girl, beautiful, Mazel Tov, wedding date was set, and he returned the following year to marry the girl. And on the way, he came to look at the place that he killed the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees that was there surrounding the skeleton of the lion, and inside the skeleton was a whole bunch of honey. There was honey, honeybees. And Shimshon scooped out some honey and ate the honey and brought the rest to his parents. But he didn't say, again, where he got this honey from. He didn't say, there were bees on the skeleton of the lion that I killed. Okay? He didn't mention any of that. Now, truth is, the interesting perush here, that Shimshon actually could have passed through the vineyard this time because it was the winter season and there was no grapes growing. There was going to be no, yetzer hara, no inclination to actually go and, eat from the grapes. But the reason why he didn't go there, the reason why he chose to travel back to the spot where the miracle was, because he wanted to say thank you to Hashem. He wanted to offer thanks to Hashem. Baruch she'asa li nes b'makom hazeh, that Hashem made a miracle for me at this time. So therefore, that's why he went that way. So they get married, Mazel Tov, and they threw a feast for 7 days. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says, from this episode we see that we have the concept of Sheva Brachot, 7 days of feasting and happiness. We also learn from Yaakov Avinu, when Yaakov Avinu, after he married Leah, which he thought was Rachel, he had to wait 7 days to be with Leah, and then only then could he marry Rachel. Okay, now Shimshon didn't know anybody in Timnah, so the Plishtim invited 30 men. 30 men to be invitees. You don't know anybody here, it's okay, we're going to invite our buddies to celebrate with the newlyweds. Now, during the celebration, Shimshon turns to the townsmen and offered them a challenge. And they accepted. And he offered a prize, if they were to answer the riddle, a prize of 30 sheets and 30 sets of clothing, if they could solve it before the 7 days wrapped up. And if they failed to solve the riddle, they would give that gift to Shimshon. So, Vayomer lahem, the pasuk says, he said to the 30 men, Meha'ochel yatsa ma'achal, out of the eater came something to eat. Ume'az yatsa matok, out of the strong came something sweet. That was the riddle. Figure out what's happening. You tell me. For 3 days he couldn't answer the riddle. They didn't know what he was referring to. Now, we know because we just told you the story and he knew what was going on. So they were stumped. And upon realizing that now they're going to have to fork over a lot of money and they have to buy clothing for Shimshon and whatever, they're required to pay the price. They went up to Shimshon's wife and they delivered an ultimatum. It wasn't a nice one. They threatened her. They said, either you find the answer to this riddle, or we're going to burn you, and we're going to burn down your house and your father's house. So right away, she goes up to her husband, this girl from Timnah, goes up to her husband, confronts Shimshon, very upset. How do you pose this challenge to these friends? You didn't even let me in on it. So Shimshon says, I didn't even tell my father and my mother what's going on over here. You want me to tell you? That caused the bride to get really upset. Wait a minute, I'm your wife. You got to tell me everything. I'm different than your parents. The whole thing, the whole spiel, I'm different. You got to tell me everything. Pressured him relentlessly. And finally, on the 7th day, Shimshon gave in and explained the riddle to her, that he encountered a lion. He killed it with his own hands and later found bees in the skeleton and honey there, and he inside, and he ate it. Now, right away, what does she do? Boom! Takes off, goes to the 30 men, relays the answer to the townsmen, and just in time, seconds before the buzzer on election day or whatever, the last day, the men ran to Shimshon and say, Ma matok midvash ume'az me'ari. What is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion? And Shimshon, he wasn't stupid. He knows what these guys did. And he told him, had you not coerced my wife, you would have never have solved it. I know. Now Shimshon had a debt to pay. He had to pay 30 sheets, 30 sets of clothing. All right, that's a lot of money. So now, instead of going to Yorkdale or Eaton Center and buying the stuff, again, Hashem gripped him with this rage or this anger of whatever, I don't know what it is, but this strength. He goes to Ashkelon. Ashkelon, although today is a modern Israeli city, Ashkelon back then belonged to the Plishtim. And he goes in and he kills 30 men, and he takes their clothing, and he takes their sheets, and he wraps it nicely in gift paper, and he says, Happy Holidays. And he gives them one to each person. And he's furious. He's furious at his wife that she divulged the answer to them. And he returned to his parents and goes, I'm going home. And his father-in-law okay, the Philistine man, the father of the Philistine woman, of the bride, interpreted this act as a divorce. Now, according to the Rambam, back then there was no get there was get in Judaism, but there was no get in the laws of the nations, in the Noahide laws. This act of going and leaving the home, that was like a divorce, and you're done. Meaning, I no longer want you. Go home. You're on your own, lady. Now, so the girl's father says, "You leave my daughter like that? No, I got to find my daughter a new husband." So he arranged for the girl to find another man out of the 30 that were invited to that party. Now she's married a second time to another guy. So now after some time, Shimshon calms down and he says, I kind of want my wife back. Maybe, I was kind of stupid. Maybe I shouldn't run out like that. Is there a way I can go meet her and see her again? He wants to return his wife. And the father says, no way in the world, right? He prevented him from entering. What are you talking about? She's now married to one of the other friends. But he goes, I'll tell you what. I have another younger, more beautiful daughter. And maybe you can marry her. Shimshon says proudly, no, that's it. Niketi hapa'am miplishtim ki oseh ani imam ra'ah. Now that I've cleansed this time from the Plishtim has no claim against me because harm I'm going to do to them. And this set the stage for the final confrontation. Shimshon then goes outside and goes to the market and buys or catches 300 foxes. 300 foxes. Not easy to catch 300 foxes, right? But he catches them. And we're going to see later on why he chose fox and not everything else. Shimshon then twisted each of the fox's tails into the next. Okay, so they were all attached together, and he placed a torch between the two tails. So there two foxes were connected, two fox, all right, and they were tied up. Put a torch there. He set fire to the torches and sent the foxes into the fields of the Plishtim, and you can imagine that as the foxes are going and running, they're igniting the haystacks, the grain, the orchards, everything burns down. And the Plishtim says, who's responsible for this? And he said, Shimshon. Shimshon, he's the guy, the husband of the girl from Timnah, because he got upset that she was given to another man by her father. So the Plishtim went. They went to her and her father and burned her and her father to death. And Shimshon said, "In ta'asun kazot, it's possible that you're going to do something like this. Nothing but vengeance against you. And only afterwards, echdal, I will stop." And the battle of Shimshon and the Plishtim continued, and eventually he reached the lands of Eretz Yisrael and drawing them in. Okay. This is part of the story of Shimshon. It actually takes up a few chapters, and again, Delilah comes afterwards, and then eventually, of course, Shimshon, the last blow where he goes, he's chained up, his eyes are gouged out. I gave a whole shiur on Shimshon. You can find it on the podcast, you can find it on the website, and you can see exactly the deeper meaning of Shimshon. And again, with his strength, one final act of strength, the whole thing comes down. He dies there al Kiddush Hashem. This is a Parsha class, not a Navi class. Why are we learning the story about Shimshon in Parashat Vayera that has to do with Abraham Avinu? Of course, it's very, very good to learn Navi, but let's connect this story of Shimshon to the Parasha. Specifically that of the Akedat Yitzhak and right before that. The story of the Akedat Yitzhak, the story of the binding of Yitzhak, begins with the words, Vayhi achar hadevarim ha'ele. And it was after these events that Elohim nisat Abraham, that God tested Abraham. There's a rule. Everywhere in Tanakh, everywhere in Scripture, where it says, Vayhi achar hadevarim ha'ele, and it was after these events, there were previously connected events that led to what is being presented now. So Rashi asks in our parasha, what are these events that are being referred to? He actually brings two answers from the Gemara. I'm going to read the Rashi inside. Yesh min rabotenu omrim, achar devarav shel Satan. After the words of the Satan, after the Satan. Why? שהיה מקטרג ואומר, מכל סעודה שעשה אברהם, לא הקריב לפניך פר אחד או עיל אחד. Of all these seudot that Abraham made after Yitzhak was born, he never went and thanked God. He didn't even bring one ox or one ram, nothing to say thank you to God. Amar lo, Hashem said to the Satan, Klum asa ela bishvil beno. Everything he did was for his son. All he wanted was his son. Every party you see was for the sake of his son. Ilu hayiti omer lo zavach oto lefanai lo haya me'akev. If I would tell him right now, this is God telling the Satan, to sacrifice him, he wouldn't delay. He would do it because Abraham's whole life was for the sake of his son. And therefore, the Satan says, go ahead. And then God went to Abraham and commanded him to sacrifice his son. That's one opinion Rashi brings down. V'yesh omrim, ahar devarav she'Ishmael. What caused these events that Abraham was tested by God to sacrifice Yitzhak? After the words of Ishmael, his other son. Shaya mitpa'er al Yitzhak, shemal ben yud gimel shana velo micha. Because Ishmael was boasting to his son, to his brother Yitzhak, his half-brother, and saying, you got to bring me out 8 days? Come on, give me a break. I got 13 years old. So now that's pain, he's telling his brother. Well, that's 8 days. You don't even remember anything. 13 years old. I remember everything, how painful it was. So he's boasting. Amar lo Yitzhak. Yitzhak tells Ishmael, Be'ever echad ata meyareni. He goes, with one limb, you're here, you're causing me, you're trying to instill fear. Ilu amar li Akadosh Baruch Hu, zavach atzmecha lefanai lo hayiti me'akev. If God told me, sacrifice your whole body, I would do it. You're here proud of your one limb. I'm ready to give my whole body. Oh yeah? And then, hence the story of Akedat Yitzhak. So those are two answers Rashi brings. Truth is, the first instance that we have of Vahi Achar Devarim Ha'ele was in last week's parasha, just before the Brit Ben Abetarim, where God told Abraham that your children and descendants were going to be in a foreign land for 400 years, but don't worry, I'm going to then make you into a big nation. After defeating the kings, Abraham was worried that he just received all the promised reward, in his bank account. Wow, I just defeated all these kings. Maybe this is the reward I'm promised. But he still doesn't have a son. He also feared that maybe Hashem was angry at him for killing so many people and cutting off their offspring. So Brit Ben Abetarim and the rewards promised to him once again, told him otherwise. Don't worry, you still got what to go. Two other instances of Vahi Achar Devarim Ha'ele is in the introductory word to the story of Paro, who finds a bug in his drink and a little stone and pebble in his baked goods, in his bread, which we're going to learn about in a few parashiyot from now. And he proceeds to launch this high-profile, all over the news, viral news, criminal case against the butler and the baker, the Sara Mashkim and the Sara Ofim. And Vahi Achar Devarim, the Devarim that this story follows, were from the national tumult that took place involving Potiphar's wife, who levied wild accusations on Yosef, that he did something inappropriate with her, and the whole country was following this news of Yosef. Can you believe it? That's the talk of the town. Look what Yosef did to the wife of Potiphar. How dare he, this Hebrew? And everyone is speaking badly about Yosef HaTzadik. Hashem says, this is the way they're talking about Yosef HaTzadik. So right after that happened, comes the news of Paro's kitchen failure, failed health inspections, and then it put everyone's mind away from Yosef and Potiphar. So that's the Vahi Achar Devarim Ha'ele. And actually, the words Vahi Achar Devarim Ha'ele also preface the lead-up. It says Vahi Achar Devarim Ha'ele, and after these events, Vatisa Eshet Adonai B'tenei Ad Yosef, Potiphar's wife cast her eyes upon Yosef. What does this follow? So Midrash says that Yosef spoke to himself and said, when am I going to have face-to-face trials like my fathers did, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov? They had trials and tribulations, and they passed it. He considered himself, unscathed, even after being sold by his brothers. So, and after those words that you said to yourself that you are not going to be tested and trialed, now I'm going to put a trial and tribulation in front of you. And the wife of Potiphar came and served up a very good test. So we see that all these cases of Vayhi achar devarim ha'eleh involve words being spoken and a subsequent response. So says the Midrash, the Midrash writes that you cannot make any business or verbal agreements, pacts, with idol worshippers. Because we see that Avraham formed such an agreement with Avimelech, Melech Plishtim, Melech Gerar, which was in Plishtim. Abraham made, in this week's parasha, right before Akedat Yitzhak, he makes an agreement with Avimelech. The treaty is actually found in the parasha. Avimelech, after the whole mix-up with involving Sarah, where he takes Sarah and then he was cured of this affliction, he welcomes Abraham to his land. The pasuk says, Hine artzi lefanecha batov be'enecha shev. Here's my land before you. Go and live wherever you want. Find an apartment, find a condo, you want detached, semi-detached, whatever you want. Fine, make yourself comfortable. Then he tells Abraham, Elohim imecha bechol asher ata oseh. I see that God is with you in all that you do. Ve'ata hishav ali. I want you to swear to me right now, Be'Elohim, in the name of God, Hine im tishkor li ulnini ulnechti, that you do not deal falsely with me, with my son and with my grandson, 3 generations. That's important. You'll see why. I want you to do chesed just like I did chesed for you. I let you live in my land. I gave this all to you. You're successful here. So we're going to make a pact. We're going to make a treaty right now that you're going to treat me and my sons and my grandsons, okay, with the same chesed that I treated you. Because you lived here in the land and you are all comfortable. So he reminded Abraham of this kindness that he lived in his land and asked Abraham to swear in return this kindness to him, his children, and his grandchildren, 3 generations of the Plishtim. And what did Abraham respond? Anochi shaveh. I will swear. I will make the treaty. So Abraham then informed Abimelech that his wells were illegally overtaken by some of the residents of his city. Abimelech pretended that he didn't know anything about it. He would investigate, and they signed the treaty. The Torah tells us that the location of this place where they signed was Be'er Sheva. Sheva from the Lashon Shevuah, okay? Also because there were 7 wells, okay? But Shevuah from the Lashon of the oath that they made there. And Abraham lived peacefully in the land of Plishtim for 26 years, 1 year longer than he lived in Hebron. So now, what chapter follows immediately this pact? Akedat Yitzhak. Vayhi achar devarim ha'eleh, and it was after these things, Akedat Yitzhak. The story of Akedat Yitzhak. So says the Tanna of Eliyahu, he brings a description of what actually took place after the treaty. The angels come up to God and they say, can you believe what just happened? Why in the world would Abraham make an alliance with an idol worshiper? How dare he do this? Hashem says, well, I'll tell you, listen, I gave him a son after 100 years, and I'm going to tell him to bring his son as a korban. If he chooses to bring his son as a korban, then I know his intentions were good, and it was for the ways of peace, darkei shalom, that's why he did it. But if not, if he says no, then you know what, I think you're right. Abraham was immediately given the commandment of Akedat Yitzhak. That's the opinion of the Tanna de Eliyahu. So to paraphrase what the angels were thinking is, how and why did Abraham enter such a treaty? Does he not see that you, Hashem, you, God, are the one that's protecting him? You're the one who took him out of Ur Kasdim, that fiery furnace. You're the one who saved him from Paro. You're the one who chose him among the other 70 nations of the world. And now he's turning to them to peace. Is he afraid of Avimelech? You punished Avimelech until he begged you for mercy. And Abraham delivered that through his own tefillah. And now Avimelech is looking for a treaty because he's the one who's afraid. Abraham has no need for it. That's a lack of emunah. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, maybe you're right, but maybe you're wrong. And I'm going to test Abraham's emunah right now by asking him to offer his son on a mizbeach. That's the opinion of the Tanna of Eliyahu. The Tzor Hamor says that there was an inherent problem with this pact based on the pasuk that says, Kisham nishbe'u shenehem. They both took an oath. And if Avimelech took an oath, that means he must have said an oath in the name of his avodah zarah, in the name of his idol. And the Gemara says that you're not allowed to, you can't vow in the name of an idol, obviously, but you also can't cause someone else to affirm their oath in the name of an idol. V'shem Elohim acherim lo taskiru lo yishama al picha. That's what the pasuk says. So Abraham first tried to make the oath alone, like I said before. Ve'anochi ishaveh. I will make the oath. Okay, me myself in the name of God, I'm good, I'm cool. But that's not what ended up happening. Says the Tzor Hamor is Kisham nishbeu shenehem. They both made the oath, meaning that Avimelech is doing the oath in the name of the avodah zarah. You can't do that. And since Hashem exacts to a hair's breadth in the judgment of tzaddikim, Abraham was tested and needed to be purified, and with 10 major tests. And when the hardest one was that of Yitzhak. The Rashbam, who was the grandson of Rashi, he offers the strongest commentary here. And he says, Vahi achara devarim ha'ele refers to the treaty that established Abraham's descendants that could not even lay claim on lands that were inhabited by the Plishtim for 3 generations. And Abraham's action here by making a treaty with Avimelech really angered God, because he had basically given away regions of the lands that were promised to his descendants. And Hashem now had to subject him to a very, very painful test, something that was going to cause him grief. Nisa et Abraham. He rebuked Abraham for thinking that he could guarantee the well-being of his son through this deal with Avimelech. So God says, and what if I were to tell you to bring me that son, and he's no longer even around to protect? What good will your treaty do? And says the Rashbam, because of this alliance that Abraham made with Avimelech, that resulted in many punishments over the next generations. They made a pact that involved 7 sheep. These 7 sheep that were given to Avimelech as part of the treaty, you know what that caused? Number 1, it caused the Aron to be held captive in the Plishtim hands for 7 months, says the Rashbam. The Plishtim were victorious in 7 wars, and they killed 7 tzaddikim. Shimshon, Chofni, Pinchas, Shaul, and his 3 sons, because of that 7 sheep. And Abraham built 7 altars, and therefore 7 temples were destroyed after Bnei Israel entered Israel. You have Moshe's Mishkan, you have Gilgal, Nov, Shiloh, Givon, and the 2 Bet HaMikdash. All because Abraham made this pact with the non-Jews, with the Plishtim. And says the Tanna of Eliyahu as well. He says, En lecha uma ba'olam she'ena mesha'bedet u'me'anim et Yisrael yoter mi-Plishtim. There isn't a nation that tortured and enslaved Bnei Israel more than Plishtim. Ela, the problem is, says Tanna of Eliyahu, bishvil shekarat Abraham beriti ma'akum. Because the reason is because Abraham made a pact with an idol worshiper. This is the reason why we're suffering. And because of this treaty, and we have limitations placed on Bnei Israel, the Plishtim have more control over them than anyone else. For hundreds of years, you read all the stories of Tanakh. All you keep on seeing is the Plishtim, the Plishtim, the Plishtim. Let's go back to our story that we began with Shimshon. The Ramban says on the pasuk, Dan Yadin Amo. It's the bracha that Yaakov gave to his son Dan. One of the tribes was Dan. He says, Dan Yadin Amo. Dan shall judge his people. Dan will, it says the Ramban, Dan will avenge the cause of his people. Ke'achat shiftei Yisrael. All the tribes of Israel as one. The Plishtim wronged all of Israel so many times. And he actually goes on to recall all the times that Plishtim did this. You have Shamgar ben Anat, Yiftach, Avdon ben Hillel, all the times that the Plishtim just wreaked havoc for the Jews. It was a horrible time whenever they were just fighting. Midrash says that David HaMelech pleaded to God and wondered why the Plishtim lived so long. Ve'oivai chayim atzemu. My enemies, the Plishtim, chayim atzemu are vigorous in life. And there's the Midrash explains why. There were why he said this. There were 7 generations from Abraham to Moshe. Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Levi, Kehat, Amram, and Moshe. 7 generations. How many generations of Plishtim lapsed in that same time period? Not even 3. Avimelech's grandson was still alive during Yetziat Mitzrayim. Not even 3 generations. Which is the reason the Midrash says why the Jews didn't travel when they left Egypt, derech Eretz Pelishtim. The Pasuk says, "Vahi beshalach parot ha'am, velo nacham Elohim derech Eretz Pelishtim ki karovhu," because it was close. But the Midrash translates the word karov not as close, but as a relative. Karov can also mean a relative. There was a relative still there in Plishtim. And that relative was the grandson of Avimelech. That Abraham swore to Avimelech, I'm not going to touch you, I'm not going to touch your son or your grandson. And therefore, the Jewish people couldn't go through that land because they had an alliance, they had a peace treaty. Abraham had to reciprocate the chesed. He had to stay clear of Avimelech for 3 generations. And we see how this happened many, many times. The Rashbam says there are many occasions in Tanakh where this peace treaty actually affected Bnei Israel settling in Israel. Rashi says because of Abraham's oath, they weren't able to take the land of Chatzerim from the Avim. Avim were part of the Plishtim. And it was only until the Avim were captured and conquered by the Kaftorim, now it was no longer in Plishtim lands, so now the Jews can go and take this land because, oh God, I can't attack the Plishtim because I have this treaty. I can't do anything. Another instance in the book of Yehoshua, the land's being divided. The area of the Yevusim could not be taken. Within that land is Yerushalayim. To this day, that's where that was, the Yevusi land. Rashi says that these were not from the Yevusi nation, but it was just the word Yevusi is in reference to Migdal David, the future place of Migdal David. It was called Yevus. The inhabitants of that land were the Yevusim, were the Plishtim, children of Avimelech. So it's not that the Bnei Yehuda in the time of Yehoshua couldn't conquer these people because they weren't strong enough. They were wiping people off the map with a snap of a finger. But they couldn't go there, they couldn't beat them because they have this peace treaty. This is the land where Yerushalayim is sitting on. To think about the travesty that Bnei Israel they reached Yerushalayim and they couldn't conquer it. Because, we have a treaty with Abraham and Abimelech. Sorry, we're just going to have to wait a little bit till this is over. And there are many, many more cases where this happens. Many more places in Tanakh where this treaty threw plans off the rails. And David HaMelech pleads to God and says, listen, we need a solution because these Avimelech family guys, they don't seem to die. They're still in their 3rd generation. Finally, Hashem says, enough. And he sends in Shimshon. Hu yachel leoshiat Yisrael. Now, while we explained that Shimshon will start the process, says the Radak, there's more to it. He says that all the previous judges would not dare fight with the Plishtim because of Avimelech's treaty with Abraham. But now, huchal shevuato shel Avimelech. The word yachel, which we translated originally to mean begin the process of defeating Avimelech, can also be interpreted as huchal shevuato, that Avimelech's oath, his promise, his treaty would be negated from Shimshon. The word yachel comes from the word lo yachel devaro. If a person makes a neder, then he shall not break his word. Yachel devaro. Because of Shimshon, Avimelech's treaty would be broken, and Bnei Israel is now exempt from their obligations. Shimshon had no desire to marry this girl from Timnah, but he just did it to settle the score with the Plishtim. His true intent, like the Navi says, was to set a pretext for the Plishtim to renege on Avimelech's oath so that his treaty be nullified. Because you can't marry with him. We're at peace, but we can't marry within. And once you marry within, you break the oath. So says the Shulchan Aruch in Yoreh De'ah, when two people swear to undertake a matter, two people make an oath, and one person breaks the oath, the other guy's also exempt. That's the rule. The other guy's also exempt. He doesn't need to abide by that oath. Says the Shach, a commentary to Shulchan Aruch, Kishvuat Avraham la'Avimelech. Like the oath of Avraham to Avimelech, Shenishbe'u ze lazeh liyot shalom benehem, who promised each other that they were going to have peace between them. Ve'achar kach avru ha'plishtim al ha'shevuah, but then the Plishtim decided to go and break that oath. Ve'nifteru gam Yisrael mishvuatam. Now the Jewish people were exempt also from that oath. Ve'nilcham Shimshon imahem. And Shimshon said, thank you. And now that he starts to fight, and he ends up getting rid of them. So Gemara Masechet Sotah discusses Shimshon's actions. He caught 300 foxes and tied their tails together. Why foxes? Why foxes? Because the fox is the smartest animal. Gemara says the fox is the smartest animal. It's the only animal that walks in reverse to evade hunters. And by walking in reverse, it creates confusion amongst the hunters because you see footsteps, but you think the footsteps are going that way, but really the footsteps are going the other way. According to the Gemara, Shimshon was saying, Yavo shu'al shechozer lachorav. Let the fox who goes backwards in its tracks, ve'ipara mi plishtim shechazu b'shvuatam, come and exact punishment from the plishtim, who also reneged on their oath, who also went back on their oath that Avimelech swore to Abraham. So the Plishtim were just like the fox in that they went backward on their oath. So why did he tie their tails together? Says the Radak, he explains, because by tying the tails together and they're walking backwards, they're bumping into each other and they're traveling backward together as a group, rather than pulling each other in opposite directions and breaking free from the rope. He wanted them in a group together so that they would go light up the field, each one of them. It would guarantee the ignition of the entire field. Says Ben Yoyada, why Shimshon sent exactly 300 foxes rather than 50 or 500 or 1,000? Because Shimshon stands, the letters of Shimshon spell out Shlosh Me'ot Shu'alim Ubahem Nifra. 300 foxes, and with them the obligation is paid off. So we see that one oath, one bad treaty that Abraham swore affected generation after generation of his descendants. 350 years, 7 generations after they left Egypt, they're still suffering from this. And they entered Eretz Yisrael, and more hundreds of years passed, and they could still not violate this treaty, despite the fact that it was causing them so much stress and so much agony and difficulty. And that lasted until Shimshon, who began the dismantling of this treaty, courtesy of the Plishtim, who broke their commitment. Achara devarim ha'ele ve'Elohim nisat Abraham. Abraham Avinu's toughest test of putting his son on the altar was born from this treaty of Avimelech. Nisat Abraham. I'm going to cause you grief, because you're going to cause your treaty caused grief for many, many generations that were to follow you. Rabotai, what does this mean? I know it's great in the news. You look in the news and you see that the Jewish people making treaties and peace treaties and this. Yay, it's nice. I can now travel to this country and I can now travel to that country and I can see, and okay, we share relations. But in the end, your only emunah has to be with Hashem. If you want to get out of any mess, if you want to get out of a galut, all these peace treaties are, well, okay. In the end of days when Mashiach comes, anyways these nations are going to recognize God's greatness. Anyways they're going to recognize the Jewish people as God's chosen people. Peace treaty or no peace treaty. The key is to have the faith in Hashem. And we saw when Israeli leaders in the past made peace treaties and gave away land. What happened? What happened when Ariel Sharon went and gave away Gaza? Look at Gaza today. Why? Because he wanted to make a peace treaty with the enemy. And by the way, where was the Plishtim? The Plishtim were in Gaza. They lived in Gaza. Ashkelon, that whole area, the Gaza Strip, that's where the Plishtim lived. What happened to him? Unfortunately, The end of his life was not pleasant, of course, unfortunately. But and some say because it was a result of that. It was a result of what he did. He gives away land to Eretz Yisrael. But he tried. I want to make peace. I want to make peace. And look at the missiles. Look how many people died as a result. And look at the terror that rose as a result of this peace treaty with the enemies of the Jewish people. The enemies don't want to make peace treaty. They don't want to make peace. Call whatever you want. They're not interested. We have to have our faith in Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what we ask Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that the zechut of the Akedah, the zechut of the binding of Yitzhak, generate rachamim, mercy for us today, overcoming all of our difficulties, overcoming all of our enemies, and B'ezrat Hashem will send us Mashiach Tzidkenu. Amen. Ken Yiratzon. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Having a wonderful night.